My wife cheated on me with my colleague. In the orchestra, a trumpet player, and I cleaned his pipes. The strange thing is, I can hear when something is off long before anyone else does. A single violin half a beat late. A cello string tuned just slightly too sharp. I've spent my entire adult life training my ears to catch what others miss. That's how I know this didn't start the night I found the messages. It started months earlier, in the quiet spaces between us. The pauses that lasted just a little too long. I'm 38 years old. I make my living playing in an orchestra. Not a glamorous one that tours the world or ends up on late-night talk shows. Just a solid regional symphony in the Midwest. We play Beethoven, Brahms, movie scores, holiday concerts, and the occasional modern piece that half the audience pretends to understand. Music has always been the one constant in my life. It's how I measure time. Seasons blur together, but concerts don't. You remember your life in programs and rehearsal cycles, spring series, summer pops, fall opening night. I thought my marriage worked the same way. Steady, predictable, built on repetition and trust. I was wrong. My wife Emily and I have been together for 11 years, married for 9. We met in our late 20s, when both of us thought we already knew who we were. She worked in arts administration when we met. Fundraising, event planning, donor relations. She understood my world, or at least I thought she did. People like to imagine musicians as dramatic or chaotic, but most of us are creatures of habit. We practice the same passages hundreds of times. We sit in the same chairs. We drink the same bad coffee during rehearsals. Emily used to tease me about that. "You'd eat the same dinner every night if I let you," she'd say. She wasn't wrong. Our life was quiet. No kids yet. By choice, we said. We had plans. Or at least we talked like we did. A house with a finished basement. A dog we adored more than was probably healthy. Sunday mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. Netflix shows we half-watched while scrolling on our phones. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic. That's part of why this hurts the way it does. If there had been screaming, if there had been constant fighting, if we'd been on the edge for years, I think I could have told myself a story that made sense. But that's not what this was. This was a slow detuning. I didn't notice it at first. Or maybe I noticed and convinced myself it was normal. Emily started working longer hours about a year ago. Her organization had gone through restructuring, and she was given more responsibility. I supported it. I really did. I know what it's like to grind through something you love and something that drains you at the same time. I had my own busy season. Rehearsals ran late, weekend concerts, outreach programs during the day, rehearsals at night. We started missing each other in small ways. Dinner would already be eaten when I got home, or she'd be halfway asleep when I finally crawled into bed. We told each other it was temporary. I believed that. But then came the subtle changes. Her phone was always face down. She'd smile at texts and then lock the screen when I walked into the room. She started showering as soon as she got home, even if she'd barely broken a sweat that day. I noticed. Of course I did. But I told myself not to be that guy. Not the insecure husband who reads into everything. Musicians already get stereotyped as overly emotional. I prided myself on being rational. I thought trust was a choice you made every day. So I chose it. There were nights I sat on the couch after rehearsal, still wearing my concert blacks, listening to the house hum around me, the refrigerator kicking on, the dog breathing at my feet, Emily upstairs supposedly answering emails. Sometimes I'd hear her laugh. That laugh is what sticks with me now. It wasn't the laugh she used with me. It was lighter, quieter, like she didn't want to be overheard. I remember one night especially clearly. I'd had a rough rehearsal, one of those where nothing lands right, where the conductor keeps stopping and starting and you feel exposed under the lights. I came home late, exhausted in that hollow way that only comes from caring too much. Emily was already in bed, phone glowing in the dark. I asked her who she was talking to. She said, "Oh, just work stuff." Her tone wasn't defensive. It was casual, almost bored. I believed her. Or maybe I needed to. I didn't go looking for proof. I didn't check her phone. I didn't follow her movements. Part of that was trust. Part of it was fear. Because once you really start listening for the wrong note, you can't unhear it. The night everything broke wasn't dramatic either. No confrontation, no shouting, no cinematic moment. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are usually my lightest rehearsal days. I came home early, stopped by the grocery store, and grabbed a bottle of wine because I thought it would be nice. A normal night. A reset. Emily's car was already in the driveway. When I walked in, she was in the kitchen, startled in a way that made no sense given the time. Like she hadn't expected me. She smiled too fast. "You're home early," she said. "Thought I'd surprise you," I replied. She nodded, eyes flicking to the counter where her phone was buzzing. She flipped it over immediately. That was the moment. Not the messages, not the confirmation, that reflex. I didn't say anything. We made dinner. We talked about nothing. I poured the wine. She barely drank. Later, when she went upstairs to shower, she left her phone on the couch. I sat there with it between us like a live wire. I want to be clear about this. I didn't want to find anything. I was hoping, almost praying, that this was all in my head. That I'd open it, see nothing but emails and group chats, and feel embarrassed for ever doubting her. My hands were shaking when I picked it up. The lock screen preview was enough. A name I didn't recognize. A message that said, "I can still feel you." I didn't read anything else. I didn't need to. That sentence echoed in my head louder than any orchestra ever could. When Emily came back downstairs, towel around her hair, she knew instantly. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't pretend. She just looked at me and went very still. I asked her one question. "How long?" She sat down, put her face in her hands, and said something that shattered whatever illusion I had left. It wasn't supposed to happen. That's when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just losing my marriage. I was realizing I had never truly known the person sitting across from me. And that realization was louder than any betrayal. I wish I could say the name meant nothing to me. But the moment Emily said it, my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with jealousy and everything to do with recognition. "A trumpeter," she said quietly, like the word itself was fragile. I stared at her, trying to reconcile that with the life I knew. The rehearsals, the concerts, the musicians I shared stands with, trusted, joked with, complained with. The orchestra wasn't that big. You learn everyone's habits, everyone's sound, everyone's tells. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the phone. I just waited, because some part of me understood that once the story started, it wouldn't stop until it hit bottom. "He's not in your section," she added quickly, like that made it better. "Different brass group. Guest player at first." Guest player. That word landed wrong. Guests are temporary. Guests leave. Apparently, not always. His name was Mark. Mid-40s, divorced. confident in the way some musicians get when they've survived enough auditions to stop being afraid. Trumpeters, especially, have a reputation. Big sound, big presence, big personalities. It's a joke in orchestras, the kind everyone laughs at because it's usually true. I had played concerts with him, shaken his hand, complimented his tone. I replayed memories in fast forward, scanning for signs I missed. The way he lingered after rehearsals, the jokes that carried just a bit too much confidence, the way Emily had once mentioned that trumpet guy who was actually kind of funny. I hadn't thought anything of it. Why would I? Emily told me they met more regularly during a contemporary program the orchestra did last winter. Extra rehearsals, smaller ensembles, late nights, the kind of schedule that blurs boundaries if you let it. It started with talking, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. I swear, just talking. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask questions. I'd learned enough about music and life to know that once someone starts defending the beginning, they already know the ending was wrong. She said he understood her, said he listened, said he knew what it was like to feel invisible in a long-term relationship. That hurt more than anything else, she said. Invisible. I had built my life around consistency, around showing up, around being reliable, present, steady. I thought that was love. Apparently, it wasn't loud enough. She said it felt exciting, dangerous, different. Words that musicians use when they're bored with playing the same repertoire and convince themselves that chaos equals art. I sat there nodding, absorbing it all with the numb focus of someone listening to a piece they never wanted to hear, but can't stop analyzing. The affair had gone on for 4 months. 4 months of rehearsals, texts, excuses. 4 months of her coming home and sitting across from me, asking about my day, listening to me complain about tempo changes and bowings while carrying a secret that heavy. I asked her if anyone else knew. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. A couple people, she admitted. Not details, just that we were close. Close. I thought about the orchestra as a living thing, a shared organism, all of us breathing together, listening to each other, trusting that the person next to you was there for the music and nothing else. Now that space felt contaminated. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Does he have a wife? No, she said quickly. He's divorced. Years ago. I don't know why that mattered to me. Maybe some part of my brain was still looking for moral math that would make this hurt less. It didn't. I asked if it was over. She nodded too fast. Yes, I ended it. I didn't believe her, not fully, but I didn't argue. There was no energy left for that yet. That night, we slept in the same bed without touching. I stared at the ceiling and listened to her breathing, counting the seconds between inhales like a metronome. I didn't cry. Not yet. The next morning, I went to rehearsal. That was a mistake. The moment I walked into the hall, I felt it. The shift. The way conversations dipped just slightly as I passed. The sideways glances. The politeness turned brittle. Mark was already there, warming up. Trumpets are impossible to ignore when they warm up. Bright, piercing notes bouncing off walls that were never meant to hide anything. He saw me. Our eyes met. And there it was. Not guilt. Not shame. Recognition. A look that said, "So you know now." I sat down and unpacked my instrument with hands that felt detached from my body. When the conductor called us to order, I played on autopilot, fingers moving from muscle memory, while my mind screamed. Every trumpet entrance felt like a provocation. Every rest felt like an eternity. I wondered how long the rest of the orchestra had known, who had guessed, who had whispered, who had watched me talk about my wife while knowing she was slipping into someone else's arms after rehearsal. Music is supposed to be sacred. It's supposed to be the place where ego disappears into the sound. That day, all I heard was betrayal. After rehearsal, Mark approached me. I wish he hadn't. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Can we talk?" I looked at him and felt something unexpected rise up. Not rage, not violence, but a deep, bone-level exhaustion. "No," I said simply. He nodded, like he respected that, like he had any right to. That was the moment something in me hardened. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about my work, my identity. The one place I thought was immune to this kind of damage. When I got home that evening, Emily was waiting, anxious, watching my face like she was trying to read sheet music she'd never learned. "How was rehearsal?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I put my case down, sat across from her, and for the first time since this started, I felt anger, not explosive, not loud, but cold and focused. "You didn't just cheat on me," I said. "You put me in the middle of it. You brought it into the one place I can't escape." Her eyes filled with tears. Apologies poured out. Regret, shame, promises. I listened, but something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't just a husband who'd been betrayed. I was a musician who no longer felt safe in his own orchestra, and I had no idea how to live with that. There's a strange thing that happens when your private life collapses but your public one keeps demanding precision. Music doesn't care that your marriage is imploding. A downbeat still comes on time. An entrance still needs to be clean. A wrong note is still a wrong note. The morning after that rehearsal, I woke up before my alarm and just lay there staring at the dark. Emily was asleep beside me, turned slightly away, like she'd been doing for months without me noticing. I didn't touch her. I couldn't. I felt like if I did, something inside me would break open in a way I wasn't ready for. Instead, I got up quietly, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my instrument case at my feet like a loyal dog. The house felt unfamiliar, like a hotel room you've stayed in too many times. Functional, but no longer comforting. Emily came downstairs an hour later, eyes puffy, movements careful. "I'm taking today off," she said softly. "I thought maybe we could talk." I nodded. Talking was all we seemed capable of doing now. Endless, circular conversations that never quite landed anywhere solid. But before we could start, my phone buzzed. A message from the orchestra manager. "Can you stop by my office before rehearsal?" My stomach dropped. I didn't show Emily the message. I just stood, grabbed my jacket, and said, "I have to go in early." She watched me leave like someone standing on the shore while a boat drifts away, unsure if it's coming back. The walk from the parking lot to the hall felt longer than usual. Every step echoed. Every familiar corner felt charged with something I couldn't name. The manager's office was quiet, blinds half closed. She gestured for me to sit, hands folded in that professional, sympathetic way that means bad news is coming, even if it's wrapped in neutral language. "I want you to know," she began, "that this is informal." I almost laughed. Nothing about this felt informal. She told me there had been concerns raised, not accusations, concerns, about professionalism, about boundaries, about the potential for discomfort within the ensemble. I asked her if I was in trouble. She shook her head quickly. "No, absolutely not. You've done nothing wrong." I waited. She continued, carefully choosing words like someone navigating a minefield. She said that when personal relationships overlap with professional spaces, it can create tension. That the orchestra needed to ensure a healthy working environment for everyone involved. Then she said the thing I'd been dreading. They're considering not renewing his guest contract. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. I didn't want this to become a story where I was the reason someone lost their job, even if he deserved consequences. I didn't want whispers about favoritism or retaliation. I didn't want pity or judgment or speculation. Most of all, I didn't want my marriage to become orchestra gossip. I told her I didn't want special treatment, that I just wanted to play, that I didn't want to be involved in decisions about him. She nodded, grateful. That's why I wanted to talk to you first. When I left her office, my hands were shaking again. Not with anger this time, but with something closer to grief. The kind that sneaks up on you when you realize there's no clean ending here. No version where everyone walks away untouched. Rehearsal that day was surreal. Mark didn't look at me. Not once. He played well, too well. Crisp, confident, like someone determined not to give anyone a reason to criticize him. I wondered how many people knew by then. I wondered if the conductor knew, if the brass section had talked, if the string players had pieced it together from half glances and awkward silences. Every note felt like it carried subtext. When rehearsal ended, I packed up quickly and left without talking to anyone. I didn't trust myself not to say something I couldn't take back. At home, Emily was waiting again. She asked about rehearsal. I told her the truth. All of it. Her face crumpled when I mentioned his contract might not be renewed. I never wanted this to affect your work, she said, voice breaking. I looked at her and felt something close to disbelief. You didn't want it to, I replied. But you didn't stop it either. That landed harder than anything I'd said so far. She cried, full, shaking sobs. Apologies poured out again, tangled with explanations and regret and fear. She said she felt lost, said she didn't recognize herself anymore, said she hated what she'd done to me. I listened, arms crossed, feeling like a stranger in my own kitchen. Finally, she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you want to try to fix this? I didn't answer right away. I thought about trust, not as a concept, but as a daily experience, the way it feels to sit next to someone without suspicion, to hear laughter and not wonder who it's really for, to go to work without bracing yourself for humiliation. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I don't even know who you are anymore, and that scares me more than the affair. She nodded, like she understood, or maybe like she finally accepted that understanding might never be enough. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, not because I wanted to punish her, but because lying next to her felt like lying to myself. In the dark, I realized something else too. I'd spent years believing my life was built on harmony, marriage, music, routine, trust. Now everything sounded dissonant, and I had no idea whether it could ever resolve. The couch became my island. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Just space, just time to breathe. But nights have a way of revealing the truth you spend daylight hours avoiding. By the third night, the couch no longer felt like a pause. It felt like a line. Emily tried, I'll give her that. She left notes. Small, careful sentences written like she was afraid words themselves might explode if she chose the wrong ones. I'm here when you want to talk. I'm so sorry. I miss you. I didn't throw them away. I didn't respond either. I stacked them on the coffee table like unread programs from concerts I never attended. During the day, I practiced. That surprised me. I thought I'd lose the desire completely, that music would feel contaminated the way the orchestra hall had. But at home, alone, with the door closed and the dog curled up nearby, I played more than I had in years. Slow scales, long tones, passages I knew so well I could play them with my eyes closed. There's something honest about practicing alone. No audience, no section mates, no need to impress, just you and the sound you make when no one is listening. Somewhere in those hours, I realized I was grieving more than my marriage. I was grieving the man I thought I was. The man who believed loyalty was enough. The man who thought being steady meant being safe. The man who assumed that because he would never cross certain lines, neither would the person who promised to walk beside him. I went through our memories like old recordings, listening for the flaw I'd missed. Was I distant? Too absorbed in my work? Too predictable? Had I mistaken comfort for neglect? Emily tried to answer those questions for me one night, sitting across from me at the kitchen table like a penitent student. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "This is on me." I wanted to believe that. I also knew it wasn't that simple. Life is rarely a solo performance. Even when someone misses an entrance, the whole ensemble feels it. The orchestra manager called again later that week. Mark's contract wouldn't be renewed after the current program. Officially, it was about scheduling needs. Unofficially, everyone knew. When I told Emily, she closed her eyes and nodded, like she'd been expecting it. "I never meant to ruin anyone's life," she said. I didn't respond, because what I wanted to say was, "You didn't ruin his. You ruined mine." But I didn't say it. Not yet. The first concert after everything happened was brutal. Walking on stage felt like stepping into a spotlight that burned instead of warmed. I imagined every face in the audience knew. I imagined every musician behind me was thinking about it, even if they weren't. Mark played that concert too. Our eyes never met. The music itself was demanding, dense, emotional, full of tension that never quite resolved. I played it well. Too well, according to one colleague who clapped me on the shoulder afterward and said, "You were really locked in tonight." I smiled and thanked him. He had no idea why. After the concert, I went home instead of joining the post-show group at the bar. I poured myself a drink and sat alone in the living room, still wearing my concert clothes. Emily came in quietly and sat on the opposite end of the couch. "I watched from the balcony," she said. "You sounded incredible." There was pride in her voice, and regret, and something else. Distance. "Thank you," I replied. We sat there in silence, two people who knew each other's rhythms intimately and yet felt completely out of sync. Finally, she asked, "Do you still love me?" The question wasn't manipulative. It was scared, honest. I stared at my hands. "I don't know how to answer that," I said. "I love who I thought you were. I don't know how to love someone I don't trust." She nodded, tears slipping down her face without drama. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "Therapy, time, transparency. I'll quit my job if I have to. I stopped her gently. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about whether I can ever sit next to you again without wondering what I don't know." That was the truth of it. Infidelity isn't just betrayal of the body, it's betrayal of reality. Once that cracks, everything feels unstable. That night, after she went upstairs, I stayed on the couch and listened to the house settle. The familiar creaks, the ticking clock, the dog shifting in his sleep. For the first time since this started, I allowed myself to cry. Not loud, heaving sobs, just quiet tears that soaked into the cushion beneath my cheek. I wasn't crying because she cheated. I was crying because the life I trusted, the one built on routine, shared understanding, and quiet loyalty, was gone. And no matter what came next, it was never coming back exactly as it was. I didn't know yet whether that meant rebuilding something new, or finally accepting the long rest. Time didn't heal anything the way people say it does. What it did was expose the shape of the wound. Weeks passed, not cleanly, not evenly. Some days felt almost normal. Coffee together, small talk, the dog wedged between us on the floor. Other days felt unbearable, like every shared memory had turned into a question mark. Emily started therapy first, individual sessions twice a week. She offered to let me read her notes, her messages, her calendar, full transparency. I didn't take her up on it. Not because I didn't care, but because I was afraid of what it would turn me into. A man checking timestamps, reading tone into punctuation, living with a low-level hum of suspicion that never shut off. I didn't want that version of myself. Eventually, I agreed to couples counseling. Not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed to understand. Needed to know whether this collapse was a sudden accident or the inevitable result of cracks I'd ignored for years. The therapist was calm, neutral, maddeningly patient. She talked about emotional distance, unmet needs, parallel lives slowly drifting apart. Emily cried, took responsibility, repeated that the affair was her choice, her failure. I sat there and listened. What I didn't say, at least not at first, was that the affair itself wasn't the sharpest pain. It was the realization that my internal map of my marriage had been wrong. I had thought we were moving together, side by side, even when life got busy. In reality, we'd been moving parallel, close enough to look connected from a distance, far enough apart to allow a secret to grow unnoticed. At the orchestra, things shifted too. Mark finished out the program and disappeared from our world with polite efficiency. No confrontation, no closure, just absence. I expected that to bring relief. It didn't. Instead, I felt hollow. Like the antagonist leaving the stage didn't fix the damage done to the set. Some colleagues were warmer than before, others awkward. A few avoided me entirely, unsure of what to say or whether to say anything at all. I became known as the guy something happened to. I hated that. Music, however, started changing again. Not immediately, but gradually, I stopped hearing betrayal in every trumpet line. I started focusing on my own sound, my own breath, my own phrasing. I played with more intention, less autopilot, more presence. One evening, after a particularly good rehearsal, I sat alone in my car and realized something unsettling. I felt steady, not happy, not healed, but grounded. That scared me almost as much as the pain had, because it meant I was adapting to a life without the version of marriage I once relied on. At home, Emily sensed the shift too. "You seem different," she said one night carefully. "I am," I replied. She nodded like she already knew. The conversations changed after that. Less pleading, less urgency, more honesty. She admitted she'd been afraid of stillness. Afraid that our quiet life meant something was wrong. Afraid that comfort meant stagnation. I admitted that I'd equated loyalty with effort. That I thought showing up consistently was enough. That I'd never considered how silence can be misread as indifference. None of that excused what she did. but it explained the conditions that allowed it. The hardest question came one Sunday afternoon, sitting across from each other with cold coffee between us. "If we met now," she asked softly, "would you choose me?" I didn't answer right away. I imagined us as strangers. No shared history, no betrayal. Just two people meeting at this stage of life. "I don't know," I said finally. "And that's what scares me." She closed her eyes, absorbing it. "I understand," she said. That was new. Not agreement, understanding. That night I realized something else. Forgiveness wasn't the finish line everyone made it out to be. It wasn't a switch you flipped or a gift you handed over. It was a process. Slow, uneven, conditional. And love? Love, I was learning, doesn't survive on intention alone. It survives on alignment. Right now, we were playing the same piece, but not in the same key, and no amount of rehearsal could fix that unless we both chose, deliberately, to retune. I didn't know yet whether I wanted to, but for the first time since everything fell apart, I knew this much. Whatever came next would be a variation, not a return, and that realization, quiet, steady, unresolved, was the most honest note I'd played in a long time. There's a point in every musician's life when you realize you're always auditioning, not just for jobs, but for roles you never signed up for. Husband, partner, forgiver, survivor. I didn't know which one I was anymore. By the time summer rolled around, the orchestra season slowed. Fewer rehearsals, outdoor concerts, lighter programs, the kind of schedule that usually feels like a reward after a long year. This time, it felt like exposure. With fewer rehearsals to hide in, I was home more, present in ways I hadn't been for months, and that meant facing the reality of Emily and me without the buffer of exhaustion or deadlines. One evening, she asked if we could take a walk. Just a walk. No agenda. We walked the same route we'd taken for years. Tree-lined streets, cracked sidewalks, neighbors who nodded but didn't ask questions. The dog trotted ahead of us, blissfully unaware of emotional minefields. Halfway through, she stopped. "I need to tell you something," she said. I braced myself. Affairs train you to expect the worst even when the worst has already happened. "I don't want you to stay out of obligation," she continued, "or guilt, or because leaving feels like failure." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone stripped of illusions, mine and hers. "I don't want to be chosen by default," she said. "I want to be chosen on purpose, or not at all." That hit harder than any apology, because it gave me something terrifying. Permission. Permission to leave without being the villain. Permission to stay without pretending nothing had changed. Permission to decide based on who I was becoming, not who I'd been. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch and imagined two futures. One where we stayed together, rebuilt slowly, carefully, like restoring an old instrument with hairline cracks you'd always have to watch. And one where I left, an apartment, quiet, my own routines, music without context, freedom mixed with loneliness. Neither future felt safe, but one felt honest. The realization came not in a dramatic flash, but in a quiet certainty. I didn't trust her enough to build forward. And worse, I didn't trust myself not to resent her for trying. The next day, I told her, not with anger, not with blame, just truth. "I don't think I can do this," I said. "Not the way it deserves to be done." She cried. Of course she did. So did I. We talked logistics. Therapy turned into separation counseling. Words like timelines and space and next steps entered the conversation. The orchestra announced auditions for the upcoming season. New positions, new contracts. I signed up, not because I needed the job, but because I needed to remind myself who I was when no one was watching. The audition room was small, quiet, neutral. Just me, my instrument, and the sound I could make when everything else fell away. I played better than I had in years, not because I was trying to impress, but because I wasn't afraid anymore. When I walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt since before all of this started. Relief. I moved out 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. No slammed doors. Just boxes, careful division, quiet goodbyes. Emily hugged me at the door. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it in a way that didn't hurt. As I drove away, I realized something important. The audition I'd just passed wasn't for the orchestra. It was for my own life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd earned the seat. Life got quieter after I moved out. Not empty, just uncluttered. My new place was small, almost aggressively simple. One bedroom, one window that caught the afternoon light just right. Folding chairs until I bought real furniture. Music stands leaned against walls like punctuation marks waiting for a sentence. At first, the silence was loud. I'd come home from rehearsal and instinctively reach for my phone, ready to share some minor detail, an off-tempo entrance, a funny comment from the conductor. Before remembering, there was no one on the other end of that habit anymore. That was the hardest part. Not the loneliness itself, but the reflexes of togetherness that took time to fade. Emily and I spoke occasionally. Logistics at first, then check-ins, then longer gaps between messages. There was no animosity left, just a shared understanding that what we'd lost couldn't be recovered by good intentions alone. She was rebuilding her life too. Different job, new routines. Therapy continued. I was genuinely glad for her. That surprised me. The orchestra offered me a renewed contract with expanded responsibilities. Mentoring, chamber work, outreach programs. I accepted without hesitation. Music felt different now. Not heavier, not sadder, more precise. I played with intention, not expectation. For myself, not for validation. I stopped chasing harmony where it didn't exist and focused on clarity instead. One night after a concert, I stayed on stage alone while the hall emptied. Just sat there, listening to the residual hum fade into nothing. It felt right. I thought back to the man I'd been before all this. The one who believed stability meant safety, who mistook predictability for permanence. I didn't judge him. He did the best he could with what he knew. But I wasn't him anymore. People ask sometimes if I regret leaving, if I think I could have forgiven her eventually, if love might have returned given enough time. Maybe. But here's the truth I don't say out loud very often. Love without trust isn't love. It's endurance. And I didn't want a life defined by bracing myself. I wanted a life where the silence between notes felt intentional, not ominous. These days, when I hear a trumpet line soar above the orchestra, it doesn't sting anymore. It's just sound, just music, just breath and brass doing what they're meant to do. And when I go home afterward, the quiet doesn't accuse me. It welcomes me. I'm 38 years old. I play in an orchestra. I once realized I didn't know the closest person in the world, and somehow, by losing that certainty, I finally learned something more important. I know myself now, and that, at last, sounds like resolution.